the Pope is telling you?
Yeah.
Go ahead, finish it out.
No, the private corporate commercial papers and securities being a privately owned Federal Reserve note FRNs and the checks backed by the corporate state spuriously created birth certificates constructed by the administratively used by and sold by the private foreign owners, officers, employees, beneficiaries, profiteers, personnel, agents, and agencies doing business as the, quote, United States of America, commercial paper,
United States of America
corporation company, and by their chartered and licensed franchisees, etc. These private corporate commercial papers contrivances have been and are deceptively traded as fungible instruments. Such misrepresentations and deceptive practices have been and are declared by United States Supreme Court as being criminal and felonious and a violation of the law. Securitization, which is wrongfully processes and practices of the homogeneous homogenizing financial instruments into fungible securities and the selling of such felonious instruments on the security markets is unlawful and illegal for the private corporations.
Now, remember that's Supreme Court, they're decisive. And they're forced to acknowledge, even though they're colored, by virtue of that's simply the law. In other words, so when you understand the coup d'etat that took place in the Act of Congress in 1871, and establishment of the platform by which these securities could operate, you see, in other words, they had to create a political platform for bureaucratized servitude and slavery to operate. Even when something's corrupt, it still needs a platform. Meaning that if you're running a corrupt game table, you still gotta do the same beauty in the casino type thing like somebody who's running legitimate. It's just that you're corrupt. And so the United States Corporation Company is that platform which was created in 1871, registered in France and Puerto Rico for the purpose of institutionalizing slavery, backed by the defeated Moors, branded African Americans. That's it. That's your history. Once you just understand that basics, you'll understand that, when somebody have us run around talking about colors, complexion, and racism, that is a diversion. Because that's what your problem is. And logically, if one would think that that they're going to bluntly tell you, even what the Supreme Court is telling you, that you're naive, not because you're absent of knowledge, it means that when you expect a blatant thief and liar to sit and say to you, I'm a blatant thief and liar, let me follow your papers that indicate that. This is the reason why, like, when you deal with them, even if you deliver an instrument to them, you also send one in the mail. You know what I mean? And also, when you do the multiple courtesy copies to others so that they have to conspire to bury it. Because they're already motivated to bury it because they already know that they're a criminal operation. What they're aware of, in general, is that the average person isn't aware of it. Therefore, that's their safety net. The people's lack of consciousness. And what occurs is, for the few who are usually, and more often than it is fairly just to say, when they get this information, they start trying to sell it rather than liberating their families. They start figuring out kind of ways to create venues to extract energy from the people on an issue that's a birthright issue. This is about birthright, divine right. It's about, because sovereign right and substantive right are unalienables. So any fee that's placed upon it is a fraud, any. Now, if you're doing something for someone, if there's an administrative cost, that can't even be big. It can only be administrative, but the principle of nationality or the birthright can't be sold. It can't be packaged. And you can, give information, but you can't sell it. And so, and then see where the Pope exposes that that African Americans, instead of being freed during the Civil War, they were used commercially to back the debt of the U.S. corporation. Now you understand why people are waking up now. They're trying to send you UCCs. What is that? Uniform Commercial Codes. So commerce means trade, right?
Yes.
So an unalienable right can't be traded or transferred to another.
That's right.
So you see the trick with the UCCs, because it's a commercial venue. It's for trading. How can you be arguing an unalienable right when trade is lienable? It's opposite. And this is back to when you understand that people can't read, or they're either being deceived by persons who are presenting these different processes to them. And it doesn't mean that they shouldn't study these things. They should know how things operate. But they should know the difference between unalienable rights, or what is called birthrights, and commercial, private licenses and securities. And this is where, when people understand House Joint Resolution 192, where the people's rights have been commercialized, and this is again when you do any research and you find out in 1913, prior to 1913, all property was held in a allodial title. Now, so therefore, after 1913, this is where you get your mortgages and deeds. And so therefore, any of these franchisee agencies, if you enter them looking for them to do anything allodial, their platform doesn't accommodate it, because it was designed to counter all allodial things. And I think a lot of times people get caught in the idea that these people don't understand, and you got to make them understand when what it is that you didn't understand, that they understood exactly what they were doing.
So then,
What they,
it's fee simple now after that time.
yeah, as the people begin to wake up.
Vassal estates, like to a king,
Yes.
which is the Pope.
Yes, and this is where even as the people are waking up, the fastest growing gentrification in the country is Philadelphia, right where they took the birthright. That's what's going on right now. So even with all of the fiat problems they're having, they're building monstrously quick, as fast as they can, skyscrapers all over Philadelphia, confiscating people's private properties, etc., faster than anywhere else in the country. And this is because they already know that the private commercial paper is getting ready to be nullified. Which means, so all of the collections of it is like people got wheelbarrows and wheelbarrows of it, and that's all they got, wheelbarrows of it, and may as well be wallpaper. And so what's happening is that they're working out the problems of converting some of it on a limited basis, and they're giving them a couple of months window to do it. And even as you see some of the things taking place, that should be public announcement, although it's publicized, they're not making it public in the sense that the average person is aware through the main media, so that they can be caught, because they know they can't satisfy it anyway. So that's where that is with that. But basically, the reversioner is the position that a proper heir would be taking. And when the Pope is talking about that the estate shall be revenued to the proper geographically defined American people, American citizens, etc. Americans, he's talking about what? Moorish Americans. And then he goes out to tell you that's what this whole corruption that we're dealing with today is what? Based on the bonds that was leaned against African Americans to back the U.S. corporate debt. And this is, again, and this is redundant, why over the years I've always told people that when they're even presented with some of these instruments and the processes, keep in mind, if you're not Moorish American, you know, you cannot be the creditor because the bonds are against the Moorish Empire. It's not against some white Americans or somebody's sovereign or just say creditor, debtor, and you be the creditor type thing, because the creditor must be named. If you ain't Moorish American, you ain't creditor. Because the bonds, what the Pope told you, this stuff was set up 150 years ago. And does he say white sovereigns? Does he say Christian Americans or North America type thing? Let me tell you, African Americans. And he's the owner of the corporate entities. So here's the head of the Roman Curia outing the Roman Curia. But you already know that he's also under pressure from the Manchurian families. You know, which we've been telling people, you know, for quite a while, that they've released those assassins on the planet. And so they're getting quite a lot of encouragement. You know, anyway, for those who just came in, what we were going over is the Clearfield Doctrine, the coup d'etat, and we was actually going over reversion of the state with your understanding of the real history, and then being heirs of the estate, how you would approach any of the franchise persons representing any of the states, agencies under the United States, etc., from the federal alleged on down, that your issue of reversion of estate is proper in your proper person, and that is the issue also in relationship that the United States Corporation company owners are to discharge all debts. It doesn't belong to you, never did. You know, and that's another thing with subsection 95A. You know, so that's why I did that to expand on people's just basic comprehension and understanding of when the Pope's talking about true beneficiary, proper heirs. You know, because again, as people begin to wake up, you see, and this is redundant again, so many people loosely throwing around the argument creditor-debtor, as if those designations stand meritoriously on their own. The heir must be named. And if you're not Moorish American, you can't be an heir, and if you're not an heir, you can't be a creditor. This is why the Pope is talking about all constitutions and treaties and obligations. He's speaking of the Constitution and treaty conjoined. And so the very nature even of the argument of the Pope is both enlightening to people who really don't know the history, but it's also supportive to those who do know. And this is, again, where you can even use the Pope's address to any of the subordinate agencies, because he owns the corporate entities. So that's basically what that's about. But basically, the reversion aspect is what I wanted you to look at. Of course, because as we were talking, so don't hesitate to use that, because that's your argument too. You would use that statement. You know, with the 95 subsection 95A. All right. And so keep this in mind when you're talking about Federal Reserve notes. What they are is private, corporate, commercial paper and checks are securities. And so when you're dealing with them, you would reference them like that. Don't reference them as money because they're not money. And what they do, when you start talking about money and payments, you've already lied. This is why you're giving this information so that we can start changing our language. Do you understand? Because when you're communicating with them and you call it money, at that time, you know, you can't charge them with fraud because you just supported the fraud. It is no different than like, say like if you're playing any kind of a game sport, right? Say you foul me, right? And so I get pissed off, so I take your hat off and smack you upside the head with your hat. Then we both get thrown out. Whereas if I just chilled out and let the rules take place, you got, you know, hit with the technical or foul, etc. But if you lose your cool and you start fouling back, same thing. So if you start calling federal commercial paper money, you just let them off the hook. If you call them officer, you just assign them. These are subtleties, you know, but this is why we always remind people, because they are what? They're imposters. However, if you call them officer because it's your estate, you assign them. And this is, again, when we tell people, and these so-called black leaders, when they keep calling a European white man, which means sovereign and ruler of the land, then they act like they're countering him with a bunch of emotional statements, because they only do that because they know that their followers don't know that it's a legal title. So they're depending on the fact that most of the people are miseducated by their leaders who are controlled by them. You know, and so due to the fact, which you already know, that culture's in the language, you already know these connotative phrases and presentments that are misrepresented as definitions are part of connotative linguistics, which is introduced for maintaining the servitude function, or the administrating the servitude position of the ens legis and transmitting utility established through the corpse of 1868. Now, and then this is again, when you understand the straw, what it really is, you find that people keep very often talking about the straw, but if you deal with them on detail, you see that they really don't have a clear understanding of what the straw is in its actual function. You know, they'll say it's a corporate entity and they're controlling my Citizens Trust or Sesquiu Trust, and I'm going to get control of my estate, blah, blah, blah. You know, all that stuff. It's not going to happen. Or it has to collapse. It's like you say, you have to collapse it. What you're collapsing is declaring your nationality and doing such things that neutralize their claim. Because that's what collapses it. But you're not going to capture it the way they present in the promised land. It's like when they ran through all these other systems and they got millions and millions of people doing these processes, and then they started rejecting people, so the people lost faith in it. So now they come with the authenticating the birth certificate, which is really an authentication of the fraud that you should be rebutting. But the people's idea is that they're going to get a benefit, or that, oh, now we finally going to get a hold of this Cusick number and control this estate. Of course, that's the promise, but it ain't going to happen. You know, but if you want to do it, you know, go ahead and play a game. But they're just buying time. So, is there any questions over there? Anybody? Give them, thank you. But it doesn't mean, but it's not a rejection of the study of those processes. Because you need to understand what they're doing and understand a little bit more. But understand the background, you wouldn't have to be told that they're not going to honor it. You would have known that. Islam, brother.
Islam, family. I want to ask you a question in regards to when you was talking about the Manchurians and the assassins that they have released.
Yeah, about roughly around little over 6.5 million amongst 20.
Amongst 20 what?
Amongst average of 20 million assassins, you're dealing with roughly 6.5 million perfected assassins that have been released on the planet to start countering European colonial operations, starting with their bankers and other members of the Barristers Association and other persons, named and unnamed, etc., which is giving them much influence to straighten out. Even though they still have a lot of power that they've been abusing, and that's because they've had institutions in place that are been operating, you know, these venues. So what they're doing, they're killing the trade windows upon which these instruments or these trades are going on, and that's how they're strangling the European colonists.
And what about, can you tell us a little something about Rex 84?
Rex 84, of course, you will know, is simply an addendum to Executive Order 11490, which is the King Alfred Plan, which is simply an expansion of Unum Sanctum policy. All is still doctrine of discovery. So even when they have, say, these different names or titles that are given to the Unum Sanctum operations, as far as time periods is concerned, you know that they're all Unum Sanctum.
Okay.
Meaning that just because they change the name, but they're simply updates of policies of the same policy. Homeland Security would be the same thing.
So like when they supposedly rewrite?
You didn't like it,
I said it's like when they rewrite them or reinvent them?
or they don't reinvent them. They may rename them to issue them to a fresh, just like when you're dealing with work cycles. You average, say, work cycles of 5 to 6 to 7 years, sometimes shorter, and sometimes a little longer for administrators. But when you're looking at a body of people, like say for instance, if everybody in here were, say, government workers, right? Whether you work post office, some federal agency, say railroad tracks, some big, you know, transportation situation, some corporate offices, you have what is called a work life. So the average work life or extended work life is average around 20 years. You know, sometimes it expands a little more, but in that area. So you always have what you call a new crop that's constantly moving through, constantly, and then after about 20 years, almost everybody's new. So they give you the same policy, they give it a new name, and you're updated. People who don't know history think it's something new when it's not something new. Just like Homeland Security is King Alfred expanded. Rex 84, King Alfred expanded.
So that was,
How can I get my hands on that?
So,
Do I just go online or?
No, you can get some pieces, but they pretty much taken it off.
so let him know that the addendum.
I mean, not that you can't get it, but you know, we can get copies for you.
So that addendum, Rex 84, was to include Latinos and Hispanics people to the list.
Yeah, but remember, what we all need to know is that Rex 84 is simply an expansion of King Alfred, which is simply an expansion of the Spanish Inquisition. That's again why a lot of times we'll go to the Spanish Inquisition to give people a background foundation so they can understand the problems that they're having today. Whether it's like the Buck Act, the Negro Act, Trading with the Enemy Act, you know, House Joint Resolution 192, any of those so-called policies are simply updates of the aspects of the Unum Sanctum operations. It is no different, say the baby. So the baby's he's small now, right? The baby's small, and whether you're dealing with a business or when we're talking about administrative, governing, but not government, administrative governing, the baby has to be updated. But how do you keep confusion down amongst the people so that they don't rebel? You give it a different name, and it's just simply an update to a new crew. It itself is not necessarily an update. You understand? It's given the same flavor, change a few words to do what? To instill the policies to those who are running the policies today. So how do you have the baby, if the baby's European, right, to run the unum sanctum policies? You wouldn't say it's unum sanctum, because people would have a definite reference point. You would give it a name and act like you just passing some legislation when it's really an update, or people being what you call groomed to take the offices, the administrative offices. Are we clear? Now, your secret societies, your Masonic different societies like that, secret societies are in place to preserve the operative administrative concepts and the preservation of the knowledge. And it doesn't mean that it's negative. It means that they're given such information that they themselves don't succumb to the designed naivety that's prepared for the masses. See, so somebody who's a Mason, you know, Eastern Star, Knights Templar, Knights Columbus, Illuminati, they may act any kind of way in public, but in their true private life, they don't believe not even 90% of the BS that the masses go by, even if they may fund it. Meaning that you'll see Masons, you know, supporting churches and everything, including 90% of preachers are Masons, but they would never admit it. Of course, that pulpit, why? Because it's contradictory. Do you understand? Meaning that they don't believe what they themselves,
Right, what they teach.
but they must preserve the institutions, to preserve the institutionalized servitude, which people call slavery. And so their 501c3 Skull and Bones agreement is their kickback for participating in the program. So for the dummies who keep paying the 10% Roman tax, which is called a tithe, they think that's Jesus' half, they're funding their own enslavement. So the 501c3 Skull and Bones agreement is the kickback that they get for helping to maintain that system. Now logically, you know, those who know what it is know it's Skull and Bones member Lyndon Baines Johnson set that up for controlling his Negro marching civil rights leader preacher guys. You see? For the masses who pay the tithing, they think they pay in God's house. And Jesus got a bank account at Chase Manhattan, and he gets 50%, and the preacher and the church gets the other 50%. That's the general concept that the people have. When those who promote it know from the door it's a fraud. Up and down, sideways, from its inception to its ending. And so the secret societies are in place to preserve those who rule from their own bull. This is why they're called essentially, in some ways, secret. So when you're talking about, again, Rex 84, King Alfred, Trading with the Enemy Act, Buck Act, etc., you're simply talking about unum sanctum policies of the doctrine of discovery, given different names for updating new workers. No different than that. If you understand it like that, nothing new under the sun.
Another question. In regards to, other than claiming our nationality, with the knowledge that you have, at this day and time, like if you have advice or just information on what it is that we should be preparing ourselves for.
This is basically what everybody should be preparing for, a transition period. That means wherever you are, you know, clean water, some dry goods, dry beans, and stored in a place where rats and mice can't get it, so that you can survive for a period of time, 3 to 6 months, sometimes 9 months maybe, while this transition is made, while this European tries to starve the people out as he's taken out of power. But as far as him doing anything correct to correct the wrong he's not going to do, it has to collapse.
And we have to do that, correct?
You do it by being yourself. See, because once you understand the basic, like for instance, like you'll hear people keep talking about the Cetus Trust, Sister QV Trust. You know, just like the Sister QV Trust Act of 1666, which comprises part of the doctrine of discovery, from which the straw that they're using now for the bonding is creating or backing all these derivatives and backing the UST bonds that's sold around the world. That is the source of their so-called economic power. And then, of course, with the Federal Reserve that was set up in 1913, 1916 to counter Noble Drew Ali to convert the estate to the corporate owners of the United States Corporation Company, which is really what you're dealing with. When you understand all of this, all of these operations are rooted in the doctrine of discovery, and you know that the doctrine of discovery consists essentially of these 5 bullets: unum sanctum, dum diversas, Romanus pontifex, intercatera divina, Sisticu V Act of 1666. All of this is expressed in the coup d'etat of 1861, Act of Congress 1871, the creation of the straw man 1868 after they closed the Freedmen's Bureau, which is known as the Bureau of Refugees, Freedmen, and Abandoned Lands, etc., which is the bond that's placed against the defeated Moors, designated as African Americans, that backs the U.S. government's debt after the Civil War, registered in the corporate entity operating in this territory called Delaware, etc. Once you understand that foundation, it doesn't matter what name they give it currently, you know that is unum sanctum, doctrine of discovery, policy, Spanish Inquisition. You're the target, you're the creditor, you're the heir, you're the true American who has been misrepresented, has been defrauded, and the Pope is telling you all of this is revenued back to you. You still have others who've been occupying our land, Europeans specifically, who are trying to claim the estate too, claiming to be Americans, claiming to be sovereign, etc. But the real deal is that the true heir, thus the true beneficiary, must be named. While everybody's claiming to be creditor, it doesn't stand on its own. What you see things being worked out is that little by little, the true heir is going to have to be named, because all other methods by anybody trying to get make claim on the estate will fail, because the true beneficiaries can only be the true creditors, because we're not the same bodies that we were then, etc. So when you look at that sequence of, and this is what we were talking about earlier, when you look at that sequence of history and you look at the foundation upon which the economic, what people will loosely refer to the monetary system was economic system, which is the birthright, theft, etc., operates, most of the questions that will rise from anyone will already be answered. When one is not aware of the background of the operations, then it becomes vague. But once you're aware of the foundation of the Spanish Inquisition and you relate all of these updates to it, nothing is confusing.
Another question I have. I had it on the tip of my tongue. Give me a quick second. All right. I heard I was listening to one of your videos, and now when people normally hear you speak about this or hear a little bit of something about it, like when you talk about people getting vaporized with different types of
yeah, with the king out, yeah, that's the update.
Yeah. Now, when you explain this to someone that, you know, to anybody that basically is hearing this for the first time, in what way can you explain that to make sense of it? And like, you know, and to,
by not going there.
Now, and what is it that?
Now, this is why, now I'm going to back up. Notice how I'm repeating. This is redundant. The reason I mentioned the different things that I mentioned, until the people know the history. Remember, the average person, average people don't know that law and history goes together because they're never taught it. All scholars know that, however. If people don't know the history of the Spanish Inquisition, and thus the doctrine of discovery, Treaty of Verona, etc., when you're telling them the symptoms of administrative activities that are in place or that operate to maintain this order, they start dealing with whether they believe it or not because they don't have a reference point of fact. Therefore, they think you got an idea that's interesting, but it doesn't involve them in their mind. It's not that it doesn't. Not unlike, like say for instance, like if you're talking to people about proper person, right? And you tell them they're not black, and they've been trained for generations that they're black and they're proud. You can, but most of the time you don't try to convince them. What you do is take them to a dictionary and give them a third degree or third grade grammar etymology lesson. And an ordinary dictionary would prove to them that they're not black and argument's over. However, if you talk facts, usually supportive facts, without that foundation, you know, some of them will operate on their emotions and try to maintain that position or try to defend it or try to relegate your statement as to your opinion or your belief. You see, meaning that if you don't teach somebody to count, they think that 2 and 2 is 4 according to belief. But once they understand the formula, they know it doesn't matter whether you're in China or somewhere else, that it is 2 and 2 is 4. Go ahead, let baby answer.
All right.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. All right.
You want to tell us something else, baby?
No, she said it all. He, sir. See, I told you. She said it all. That's right. I know.
All right.
That's right.
All right.
Now. All right.
Now that was impressive.
All right.
You got that right. You got that on tape, right?
Yes, it's on tape. All right. On tape. You can't hide secrets now. You're like, get it out of here. Come on, I did all I had to do.
But anyway, so back to the point. By the descendants of the Moorish Empire starting to be themselves or claiming your estate, meaning that you're coming out in law from a state principle. You're coming out of the shadows and speaking up. Now keep in mind, in accord with universal rules of state law, an heir to the estate that has been held non-descendable or incompetent, which allows and has allowed those who are operating the Cedars Trust to extol the benefits by virtue of administrative processes, which is what they've been doing with the straw, etc. That's the transmitting utility for the trust that was set up without your permission, without your knowledge, by the bishopric of Rome. And so when you're talking about the bishopric or the high priesthood, you must understand that you're talking the Vatican, you're talking the bishopric, you're talking the Pope, you're talking about the presidents for the United States Corporation Company since Lincoln. You're talking about the entire Bar Association, British Bar Association, and the American Bar Association, all high priests who have different titles, and the people get confused when they see the different titles, not knowing that the reverend down the corner is a spy. That a politician is a high priest, just like the high priests in Bohemian Grove who are politicians. Once you understand the same thing goes with these different agencies, they are all subdivisional franchises of the Spanish Inquisition. That's what the United States Corporation Company is. When you understand that those 3 stars that you see operating in the territory of the land that's under the control of the Washington District of Columbia Corporation, you see the 3 stars. And in Philadelphia, you'll see it flying at 18th Street, 3 times 6 is 18. And you will see the first star, that's the Vatican. Second star, that's the District of London. Third star, District of Columbia, Washington. Now, so what you have is the Inquisition operators or the authoritative arm of what they would call spiritual spell casting. That would be the Pope and the Bishopric of Rome. Then you have the creators of the fiat institutional instrumentation and defrauding. That would be the District of London. And then you have the military arm to enforce the Spanish Inquisition. That's the United States Corporation Company. They work in tandem. All of them are high priests. The confusion with the masses is that to the masses, they're separate. You know, this whole idea of separate church and state that they've been told, not understanding that they are the same crew. The same way the masses who don't understand how things work think there's a separation between the Democratic and the Republican parties. And they start arguing, you know, who's going to get elected, Hillary Clinton or Trump, etc. It doesn't matter. They're all part of the same game. The changing game is that there's been interjection by the Manchurian families. And so to that degree, there's some change in force of agenda, which say maybe somebody like Trump.
Which is going to be my next question.
Do you
Can you shed some light on him? You have, you know, as far as...
Well, you always take it with a grain of salt because they're all part of Unum Sanctum operations. But he's also operating with the reality of the Manchurian families in the background, which has also been his protection. You know, because other than that, they may have bumped him already.
Yeah.
Can you be any more detailed about the Manchurian family?
Manchurian families are what you call old Chinese families. Now you gotta remember, the United States Corporation Company that has been disguised as government of a country, which it isn't, never was, has been funded for over the last 50 years, mainly by China buying their bonds. Are we clear? So essentially, over the last 50 some odd years in that area, the United States Corporation Company has been getting all the material goods that has made them prosperous for free under fraud. All right? So while to the masses who don't know how things work, they're thinking that the operations was coming from the United States Treasury because they didn't know that it was dissolved in 1921. Don't exist. The treasury they're talking about is the treasury of the bishopric, which is the treasury of the private corporate entity style of the United States Corporation Company under the Inquisition Revenue Services, disguised as the Internal Revenue Services, registered in Puerto Rico. Now, with the pressure from the Manchurian family, you can see that Puerto Rico defaulted on was about 466 million single payment May the 2nd, so Puerto Rico went bankrupt. So essentially, what it was really the United States Corporation Company, which was already bankrupt, but they really bankrupt this time, like really. So again, so what's happening is the reverberations. What's happening around the world is it's not going to crash. It has already crashed. Administratively, they've been doing what might be called an excellent job of covering it up to avoid what you call chaos in the streets, but it's already done. The processes of setting up a new platform by which things can operate with a more equitable economic system, not saying money, economic system, is being worked out with some negotiations and then some resistance, some assassinations, but the change is definite. Meaning, it is not coming, it is already here. But when one has a background knowledge of the real history, cause and effect, none of this other stuff distracts you that they may put out there to create arguments like, now they're talking about, you know, men and women going into same bathrooms and stuff like that, and people are arguing that this is diversion. You know, stuff like that. So you would, knowing the real politics, you wouldn't even get caught up in arguments. You wouldn't even entertain it. You know, but again, back to your earlier statement, for someone who is not familiar with this, give them a background in history so as to know how they got to where they are today. And things will start falling in place for them. They'll come out of the stage of what's called third person and come back to first person. And it is not like unlike shadows and multiple cells starting to blend and line back up again. Right now, the people are in like triplicities, they're in confusion. And they're in confusion because they don't know their history, they don't know themselves. You know, but if you tell the history, it'll start dawning on them who they are, what they are, why they are. And also, you can almost predict motions and motives of people operating in the name of government. But once you really start comprehending this thing, you would not be calling them officers. You definitely wouldn't.
We are the ones that elect officers, right? The Moors.
In other words, what you are, let's make this clear. This is what you are. You're the overthrown sovereign. Get that very clear.
Correct.
You are the overthrown sovereign. The bonds and the debt is against your defeated empire. This is where the folks talking about the bonds created the United States debt backed by bonds leaned against African Americans. That's another way of telling you the same thing. Once you understand that, you understand the politics. And you would start, in your mind, starts working out these problems with that mentality. In other words, you will come out of the third person perspective, get into first person perspective, and logically it becomes a blatant, open, responsible task for you at this time. It doesn't, you wouldn't take a vague position like that's somebody else's information. And you would find all rightful and intelligent methods by which to communicate it to another.
How do I learn how to write grants to, say, China, and also like once I claim the nationality, also
This is why you're given the concepts and the background. And even when you would write, say, to China, etc., you would do it through organized body politics, not yourself. Not that that wouldn't be possible, but it would be through organized body politics. And this is where your acknowledgement of your own Great Seal Order would come in. And of course, you would already have general knowledge, and so it wouldn't be confusing, you know, and you do it through committee. And this is where, like you see, Raleigh said to the Moorish, says, you know, help me in my great missionary work to bring my people back into the constitutional fold of government, enforcing our Constitution for the United States of America. Take your places amongst affairs of men. Come and link yourselves back with the families of nations. You know, so that's a political forum.
Okay. And I know and learn how to fight these things too.
Yeah. But again, like as you know, even though they may resist, it is concept. Once you understand who you are, who they are and are not, you pretty much start clearing up your concepts. And as we were talking, and we was actually talking earlier, you know, this is why you do affidavits and writs, agreements of jurisdiction, quo warrantos. You do not do motions.
I heard that on one of your videos. Took notes.
Yeah, the reason you don't, because they are not the legitimate government. You are overthrown. You know, and their very operation of the United States Corporation Company was for, and acts according to overthrowing the Republic. That's what is called the Secret Treaty of Verona, Act 1, you know, Article 1. And of course, the Act of Congress, 1871, was the political platform that was set up as an impostorship. It was set up as an impostorship. It didn't, you know, accidentally or somebody got corrupt. It was set up as an impostorship of administrative government. That's it. And then once you're clear with that, everything else falls in place. Is there any other questions?
Yeah, question.
Go ahead.
When you said they buy at the time, you know you talk about the UCCs and when you found, you said that
Use
they're.
the mic. Use the mic.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Yeah.
You know when they say, the UCC, they say, you know, you say that they tell you that you can get to these bonds, secure bonds and assets that hold it into your birth certificate rights. So when you said they are buying time, are you implying that it's the
This is what I'm saying. Let's use your common sense. Sis, you know what UCCs are about? What have you told her?
So far, I told her.
So far, I tell her. Go ahead.
So far, I just basically told her it was the, Uniform Commercial Code. This is what I've been learning from, video and also, is that it's how you secure your bond that they held with the assets that's behind your bonds, how they sold it.
Behind the bonds that they claim is your bonds.
Right.
See, and even that subtlety. Now, and the reason I'm saying that, because this is important. Like, say for instance, like, say you all decide to go in business, right? Say you wanted to open up, say McDonald's on a lot across the street, right? What would be one of the first things that you would do as far, like say if you had the funding, etc., you had the wherewithal and the franchise, what would be one of the first things that you do in any business? You want to place it over here. What would you do with this whole area? What would you do? You do a market research, would you?
Right.
And what would you do? Would you put a McDonald's there and McDonald's on the other corner?
Wait, say, would I put it on the other
Would you
one?
put a McDonald's there if there's a McDonald's on the other corner?
Of course not.
Why?
Because you want less competition.
Yes. It's called market research.
Right.
Now, keep it simple. Millions of people have been following UCC financial plans for millions. Keep in mind, we're not talking about a couple thousand. Millions of people in North America have been following UCC1 financial statements and other forms of UCCs, and in recent year, now trying to authenticate the birth certificate, all with the intended design of trying to get a hold or control of that CUSIC number, access to the Sister Q and Caesar's Trust set up under the Spanish Inquisition, held by the Roman Curia and its operatives, called the straw man, transmitting utility, nom de guerre, etc. Man of straw, multiple names are synonymous with this trust that was created under the Spanish Inquisition, controlled by the Roman Curia, and written in all capital letters to indicate its corporate status distinguished from the living. Used the bond to back up the U.S. corporation debt, which was registered in France and Puerto Rico specifically, also Guam and the Philippines, but in general, Puerto Rico and France. United States Corporation Company represented to the people as a country when it's actually a body of imposters. That's the operation. The UCCs presented as the people became conscious that the people, the living, were used to back the U.S. corporate debt, and that they were listed as the debtor when actually they're the heirs. Then the UCC's exposure, because truth in commerce is law, if you understand, these are fundamental ancient principles. But what they're not explaining to people is that unalienable rights cannot be rightfully exercised or entertained on a commercial venue, because it's actually opposite. Because unalienable rights cannot be sold, transferred to another. This is another thing that you go in a dictionary and show people. Unalienable rights. And then someone presenting to you a commercial venue to try to claim an unalienable rights, you're in a platform that's actually opposite of what you're trying to do. but yet those promises are made. So sis, out of 1,000 people, right? Just as an example, we're talking millions. We're talking millions. When people that are going through the processes of the UCCs, etc., for trying to reclaim or trying to get control of that CUSIC number and access to the Cedars Trust, etc., can you name, just as an example, just 5 people amongst the millions of people who have been doing this for over 40 years that have been totally successful, but yet there have been people selling packages, selling processes, etc. Can you name, or can you go on any insight on any internet and punch up 5 names that have completed the process, got control of the Cedars Trust, etc. But you can find millions of people that's in the process, always in the process. Meaning that it's a race that the line keeps being moving every time they get close to it, which means they're buying time. Now do you understand? Which means in any business where you don't have any measurable percentage of people's success, that's called failure. In process, that's called fraud. If you understand. So if you're in any business, like say if you're invested in business, right? You invest in a business that has a 50-50 chance of success, that would be called high risk, wouldn't it? It'd be called high risk investment, wouldn't it? If it's 45%, it goes lower, right? 40% it goes lower. In that area, in most investments, they pull a fiat out of stock because it's not viable. Now, when you're doing the UCCs, you can't show 5% success rate. What does that tell you? Good brother, back to your question.
That's a poor investment.
They're buying time, aren't they? Because anything that's valid, you would not have such a poor success rate. But yet you have millions of people keep going through the process. So you understand what I'm saying when I say they're buying time? Because they're controlling the platform upon which these processes are made. What do you see people doing? They go file UCCs, they register them with the Transportation Department or Department of Commerce. They go through all these processes, get a apostille, spend fiat for take off from work, spend fiat, parking, and all this sort of stuff. And they run in these cycles, and the only fiat, the big lump fiat, is always passed to the one who's selling the package. Now, if the persons who sell these packages were successful, then they wouldn't need no fiat from you because they got their hands on this bottomless pit account. It's like somebody, it's like somebody who swims in the ocean talking about, I need some water for my pool, so make sure you bring a bucket of water when you come over. So somebody that's selling you a process has achieved this bottomless pit of credit, limitless credit, and all these vouchers. They wouldn't even think about fiat. Why would they take fiat from you? And then everybody else lined up to give them theirs too, to start these processes. It's like the very nature of the activity. Once you figure it out, it doesn't mean that it ain't supposed to work, meaning that if they present to you a card game and they say this is how the game works, it's not that the game doesn't say that. I'm not arguing that. I look at this statistical analysis. I don't look at what is said. If you're talking about race, if you're talking about everybody swimming across the pond, they've been swimming across the pond for 10 years and you see all these skeletons along the shore. What you look at, how many people made, what you want to count is how many people made it across. Not that this is the place where you swim across. So if you see people been going across there for 10 years and you see 2 people over there, that means the success rate ain't too good. Now, is that not what UCCs have been showing evidence? So that means whoever been controlling the process is buying time. It is like this, look. Even the baby, right? And we hold the baby over there and hold the baby up so the baby can turn that switch. Does that switch not turn the light on or off because he's a baby? All right. When we do like this, does the air consider whether we Baptist, Methodist, or Muslim? When you get sleepy, does it consider that? When it rains outside, does it say, oh, he's Episcopalian, we ain't gonna wet him? Same thing. All things that are legitimate and true have no bias. So if the UCC process was valid, all these millions of people that's been working for years, because they've been working this stuff for the last 40 years, you'd be hearing all up and down the street the success rate. You hear once in a while someone who's done this great study and got to the point of voucher. And soon they go try to transfer the vouchers, they arrest them. Or they threaten their lives. Does that sound like success rate?
Or they disappear.
Yes. Like Charlotte.
They disappear.
So the deal is, the point that I'm making is, I'm not rejecting it. I'm just saying we need to understand that, you know, the commercial venue that they're talking about is that people of Moorish descent designated as African Americans are the ones that were used to back the U.S. corporate debt, which is all these bonds. Therefore, ain't nobody else can claim some sovereignty and thus being the true creditor behind this whole crap with this cusic number, because it's us. So anybody else claiming to be the debtor, the creditor, their claim is invalid. So here's the Pope, who is the head of the Roman Curia, and the Roman Curia is comprised of all the corporate entities on the planet. Are we clear? The Pope is the head of the Roman Curia, which is comprised of all the member corporate entities around the world belong to the Pope. He's telling you that it was African Americans that are used to back the debt. So how can somebody else be the creditor? Therefore, you can see the instrumentation and the issuance of these different processes to claim the right of the estate is really a diversion, because a lot of people are trying to claim it, and the only claimant can be the ones who are most silent, and that's African Americans who keep thinking they're black. And this is, again, when you really understand this, where many of those administrators pretending to be judges will tell a lot of the Europeans who have even perfected the process that you can't use that common law, that Constitution as a defense, you're not a party to it. Well, another way they say it, you're not an heir. First, it might sound abusive from a legal, lawful perspective that they're blocking them due process. When the real deal is, because remember, the heirship, just like the baby's heirship is based in his mother. Right? If there's no connection, then the baby would be declared non-descendable. Or the baby's in a wardship position, whoever controls that estate, which is really what's going on here, has access or control of the estate, and by default have been abusing the administrative position. This is where the Congress has designated trustees of the world's largest bankrupt entity. That platform was set to administrate the debt. And this is where subsection 95A comes in. That's why I put it in reversion.